Today, you're going to learn exactly how to use Firebase for authenticating your Next.js applications. Firebase is a backend as a service. It's developed by Google. It's a great way to use authentication for your applications. It's super easy to do, and you can also use their database and some other features as well. And once we finish this application, what we're going to have is we're going to have this sign-in page here. This is my running application that I just built for this tutorial, which we're going to have this very well-styled sided page here. And then we're also going to have a sign up page here. And then we're also going to have just a default home page that we're only going to show if the user is indeed signed in. So without further ado, let's go ahead and show you how to add authentication to your Next.js apps using Firebase. So the first thing that we are going to do here is we are going to go ahead and npx create next app at latest. So this is just going to create a template Next.js project for us so we can then go ahead and add authentication to it. So our project is named, I'm going to just name it Firebase Auth, but you can name it whatever you want. We're not going to use TypeScript, no ESLint. I am going to use Tailwind. I am going to add some styles to our sign in and sign out page. Well, I'm actually going to have ChatGPT do that for me, but I'm going to use Tailwind for that. So if you're watching this, I would use Tailwind. I'm not going to use SRC. I am going to use the latest app router. I'm not going to customize the default import alias. So this is going to go ahead and create this project for me. And then now that it's done here, I'm going to go File, Open, and then I'm going to open this project. So now that I have this project in place, I should be able to just do npm run dev, and this should start my Next.js server here. And then if I go to localhost 3000 within my browser, I refresh this page, it should go ahead and show you just the template page.jsx file that you have here. So this is basically just showing me what Next.js has already created for me here within my app folder. We have a page.jsx file or JS file, and then this is going to be just the default kind of boilerplate that Next.js gives us out of the box here. So we have this in place, and now we can go ahead and start setting up Firebase. And for this tutorial here, we're basically just going to do a sign up, a sign in, and a log out functionality for this application. And I'm also going to show you how you can use your user, your logged in user, or the lack of one throughout your application as well. And it's going to be super simple, super easy to do, very beginner friendly if that's you, or if you've been developing a while and you just want to know how to use Firebase authentication, this is for you as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to Firebase here. So this is going to be firebase.google.com. And I'm going to go to console in the top right. And then you should see a page like this. So if you don't have any other projects, this is what you should see. I don't think you'll have to set up anything else, assuming you're logged in with a Google account, but you might need to log in with a Google account to see this page here. We can then go to create a project. And I'm going to name this Firebase -auth. And then I'm going to accept the terms here because of course I read them. And then I'm going to continue. I'm not going to use Google Analytics for this. I don't care about any of this stuff, but I am going to accept the Google Analytic terms, which I of course read as well. And then here it's going to create our project. So I'm going to just give this a few seconds and let it finish up here. And now it has created the project and it's directed us to this kind of overview page. So what we're going to do now is we're going to click on this web icon here because we're setting up a web application. So we're going to go ahead and click on this. I'm going to call this Firebase Auth. And I'm not going to set up Firebase hosting, and I'm going to go register app. And now what it's going to do here is generate our web app or generate different credentials for a web SDK. And we're going to see those here. It basically gives us kind of what we need to do to implement or to connect Firebase to our application. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I am going to go ahead and I'm going to copy all the properties and values within the Firebase config, and then I'm going to head back to my Next.js application. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to add a file, and it looks like it added this file into my app folder. You do not want to add this to your app folder, and it did it again, but let me do .env.local is the file we're going to add, but I'm going to make sure that this is in the root of my application here. So yes, I just want it within my Firebase auth project. So your .env.local file, it should be at the root of your application, meaning it's at the same level as app, node modules, public, JSON config, and package.json, tailwind config, all these things. Your .env should be at this level. It should not be within your app folder. You will have issues if you put it within your app folder. Don't ask me how I know. And now I'm going to paste all my variables within this .env.local, but these aren't the names I'm going to use. I'm going to actually do next public Firebase API key, and then I'm going to set that equal to my API key, and then I'm going to do the very same thing. I'm going to do next public Firebase auth domain, and then I'm going to do next public Firebase project ID, next public Firebase storage bucket, next public Firebase messaging sender ID, so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and add all those here, and I'll see you when I'm done. So here's what I have at the end here. I don't think I'm missing anything. I don't need the, what was it called? The measurement ID. We don't need that for the sake of our project. So this is what I've added to my .env.local file. But now what I'm going to do is we're actually going to use these. So I'm going to close out that folder. I'm also going to close my home folder. And within my app directory, I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to just call this Firebase. And then within this Firebase folder, I'm going to create a config.js file. And then within this config.js file, what we need to do here is basically set up a very similar config that they give us here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just copy this entire configuration right here. And then I'm going to paste this here, and I'm going to get rid of the comments just because I think those are just cluttering things up a little bit. So I have this right now, but we need to use our own .env variables here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do process.env. And then I think this was like React. Actually, let me just copy it from this. So next public Firebase API key. Next public Firebase API key. And then I'm going to go through all of these, and I'm going to actually remove measurement ID, but I'm going to go through all of these, and I'm going to use process.env and then my environment variable, and I'm going to just match it up here. So auth domain is going to be Firebase auth domain, project ID is going to be project ID, so on and so forth. So let me do this, and I will see you in a sec. So I have all these in place, but there's a couple of extra steps that we need to do here. So for one, what we're going to have to do is I'm going to have to, so we have our app here, we have analytics, although we're not really going to use analytics, so I'm going to get rid of that. But for server-side rendering, we're going to have to take a little extra step here, in which I'm going to have to say, so instead of just saying const app is equal to initialize app, what we want to do is this line of code right here. And this is just a line of code that I found that is something that you need to do for server-side rendering, in which you're basically going to check get apps, which we actually need to import those from Firebase apps. So let me import get apps at the top of this. So we import get apps from Firebase /app, and then we're going to set our app is get apps.length. So see if we have an app, then we initialize it with our Firebase config, else we just call get app. And I also need to import get app from Firebase /apps. And this is just kind of a workaround for server-side rendering within our Next.js application. So this is our app here. And now what we need to do is we also need to say const auth is equal to get auth. And then I also need to import to get auth from Firebase /auth. So let me import get auth from Firebase. And did we install Firebase? So I don't think we did. So we also need to npm install Firebase. So I'm going to copy this here. Now I'm going to come back to my terminal. I'm going to open a new terminal actually. I'm going to npm install Firebase. So we're going to go ahead, get that installed. Just give this a sec to make sure it works. And it does. So we're all good from that front. And I'm going to import this from Firebase /auth. And I'm going to say auth, not whatever the heck I was spelling. And then we're just going to pass in our app right here. And now we just need to expose this to our application. So I want to do export app, auth, and I can remove get analytics. We're not using that. So I'm going to remove that as well. And we should be all set. So this should theoretically get us all connected to Firebase for our application. Now, we are going to use one other package here, and this is going to be React Firebase hooks. It's just some really nice hooks for working with Firebase. So we're going to use those as well. So I'm going to do npm I React Firebase hooks. So I'm going to go ahead and install those here. And now that we have this connection to our Firebase here within our Next.js application, what we can do is we can now create our sign up, sign in, and log out features. So what I'm going to do right now is let's head on over to ChatGPT, and I'm using GPT-4. I think this should work just fine with GPT-3, or you could also just copy my styles at the end if you want. But what I'm going to do is saying I'm using a React application, create a sign up by email and password page. I'm using Tailwind CSS, make it in dark mode, make it look very good, and make sure the inputs are controlled components using React use state. So did I tell him using Tailwind? Yes, I did. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. And here, I've used this in the past, and it's told me to like set up Tailwind and stuff, which we've already done, but it's usually pretty good at creating just like a boilerplate sign up page. So we can see it's going through here. It's handling the sign up. It's just console logging user signed up, which is totally fine right now. But it's adding these Tailwind classes. It's adding an email input, a password input, and then a button to handle sign up. And then it is exporting this from this page. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just copy this because it all generally looks right, except I do see one thing we're going to have to change. But within my app directory, I'm going to add a new folder and I'm going to do sign-up. And then within this sign-up folder, I'm going to add a page.jsx file. So what I've done is I've added a public route here at /sign-up, and it's going to show whatever I render within this page.jsx file within this sign-up folder. So Next.js automatically adds this public route here. So now that I have this in place, I can just paste what I did. And let's go ahead. And I don't need to import React, but I do need to make this a client component because I'm using React state here of set email, set password, so on and so forth. And we're handling the logic here. And you can see that it's just adding these different Tailwind styles here. So I think I should now be able to go back to my application. And if I go to sign-up, I should be able to see this sign up page, which honestly, it's a fine page. It's nothing fantastic, but it's also like a decently looking page, better than what I would do by just not using styles at all. So this looks pretty solid here. So now that we have this sign up page in place, now we need to handle this handle sign up function, and we need to connect it to our Firebase application to actually sign a user up within Firebase. So what we can do is I'm going to import a couple things to the top of this file here. So I'm going to first import use create user. Actually, hold on. Before I type all this out, because it's a lot, I'm going to just import empty square brackets from, and it's going to be React Firebase hooks /auth. And now that I have this, I think it should be able to auto complete. Yeah, use create user with email and password is what we're going to use here. And then I also need to import my auth from @/app /Firebase /config. And I'm going to import auth, since that's what I'm exporting from my Firebase.config file right here. I'm exporting auth and then importing it right here. So now that we have this in place, what we can do is right under my email and password for my React use state, I'm going to say const create user with email and password is equal to use creates user with email and password, and then pass in our auth config. So calling this hook from React Firebase hooks will return an array in which the first value of that array is going to be a create user with email and password function that is going to allow us to create a user with email and password within our Firebase project. So I have this here, and then all we basically need to do now is call this create user with email and password with an email and a password. So I'm going to make this an async function. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to say try. I'm going to put this in a try catch block just so we can handle our errors here, assuming we make errors, which I tend to do from time to time if you've ever watched my tutorials. But I'm going to call what we're going to do is I'm going to say const res is equal to await, and then we're going to call create user with email and password, and we're going to use our email and password and pass those in as argument 1 and 2. And I'm going to console.log my res here. And then we're also going to set our email back to an empty string, as well as our password back to an empty string, because if they submit this successfully and we make it to this point, it means we haven't made an error here, or else it would have entered the catch block. So we're good to kind of set these back to an empty string. Then I'm also going to catch an error, and I'm just going to console.error and pass in the error. So I think that is all I really need to do here. So now let's head back to the sign up page. I'm going to open up my inspector here. I'm going to open up my console because we're console logging the results from Firebase. And let me add Ryan at coderyan.io. And then I'll type in a password here. And then I'll click sign up. And we can see I do indeed get an error here. And I get a 400 saying configuration not found. And I might know what's going on here. So let's come back here. Let's go to authentication. And I'm going to say get started. And then I'm going to go to email and password. And then I'm going to enable email and password and then click save. And then I'm going to come back to my users and let's try this again. Let me just make sure that I kind of have everything set up correctly here. And I believe I do. So let's go ahead and try this again. So I'm going to clear this. I'm going to do Ryan at coderyan.io and then a password. And now I'm going to sign up, and you see I don't get an error here, which is always good. I get a response, and you can see the response has a user in which as Ryan at coderyan.io, and it looks like it successfully signed up this user. So let me close this console, and let's go to our Firebase here. And on my authentication tab in my users, let me just refresh this or refresh it here. And you can see I have added a user, Ryan at coderyan.io. So we have just successfully signed up a user within our application. Now, from here, what we need to do is allow this user to now sign in now that they've signed up. So what we can do is I can add a sign in page. So I'm going to do a very similar thing. Do the same thing, but make it a sign in page. So now it's going to basically do the very same thing. And I could just copy and paste my sign up page and tweak some things, but we'll just let it kind of do its thing here. So it's completed this. So I'm going to copy this and then head back to VS Code. And I'm using the theme Winter is Coming, in case you are wondering. I'm going to add a new folder within my app directory. I'm going to call this sign-in. And then I'm going to create a page.jsx file within here. And then I'm going to paste it. And then this is also going to be a client component that it doesn't need the React import. But I'm going to use client here, handle sign in, adds our Tailwind styles, sign in, email, password, calls handle sign in. So yeah, this looks totally fine. And then in my application here, if I go to sign in, you see that I do have my sign in page. It looks just like my sign out page, but we are indeed at sign in, and we see sign in here. Now, what we need to do is we need to implement the handle sign in function. So it's actually going to be pretty similar to the handle sign up function. So we're going to first import a couple of different things here. So I'm going to say import empty curly braces from React Firebase hooks /auth. And this is going to be, it's going to be use sign in with email and password. And let me see here. And this was use create user with email and password. So use create user was in our sign up page, and within our sign in page, it's use sign in with email and password. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to import auth from our app /Firebase /config. And then at the top of our file, right below our password, we're going to say const. And very similar thing as we did before, it's going to be const sign in with email and password is going to be equal to, you guessed it, use sign in with email and password passing in our auth config. So use sign in with email and password is going to return an array in which the first value of that array is going to be sign in with email and password function, in which we can call it to sign a user in with an email and password. So let's go ahead and do a very similar thing as we did before. Let's make this handle sign in an async function. And I'm going to do try. I'm going to say const res is equal to await sign in with email and password, passing in our email and our password. I'm going to just console log my result. And then if they successfully do this, sure, we'll go ahead and set the email and password back to an empty string. But I think it also makes sense to just redirect them back to the home page so they can actually use our application now that they're signed in. So the way that we can do this is I can say const router is equal to use a router, and then make sure, so this needs to import from next/navigation, not next/router. I've made that mistake from time to time. And then we're going to use router.push to our home page. And then we'll catch an error, and I'm going to console.error our error. So what I'm doing here is I'm calling the sign in with email and password function from our Firebase hooks package, and then console logging the result of that, setting the email and password back to an empty string, and then pushing the user back to our home page. Because theoretically, if we don't get an error here, then we should be good to push them back to the home page, assuming the sign-in was successful. So I think we can go ahead and try this here. So I'm at my sign-in page. I'm going to open up my console again, and then I'm going to use my email and password that I just signed up with. I don't forget my password at this point. I think it was this. So I'm going to click sign in, and then we get email is not a function. That makes actually a lot of sense. And it makes a lot of sense because this should be set email and this should be set password. One of these days, I'm going to do one of these tutorials and I'm not going to make any errors, but this is just the state of development, I guess. So let me click sign in again here. And you can see I get pushed back to my home page, which is definitely a good sign. My response here, it does respond with a user, ryan@coderyan.io, and all the different user credentials. So it does look like I signed in successfully. So we've implemented signing up and signing in, but now we need to implement logging out. And then like you don't want to just have sign in and sign up. You definitely want to be able to use that user throughout your application. So like if they landed on this homepage here and we only wanted this homepage to show to a logged in user, well, we might just want to check, okay, do we have a user? If yes, show this homepage. If no, send them to our sign in page or our sign up page, one of the two. So let's go ahead and implement this page. So the first thing that we're going to do is actually get our user to use within our application. And that is actually really, really straightforward because all we need to do is use another function or another hook from our Firebase auth package that we already have. So I can go ahead and head back to VS Code here. And then within my root page.js, I'm going to change this to JSX because rename JSX because I like the icon better. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, well, first I need to import something. So I need to import from our React Firebase hooks package. And this is going to be use auth state, but it's also going to have to be from Firebase /auth. So let me just make sure I get, use auth state. And this is also just going to be a client component here. So use client. And then now that I have this in place, we can call this with our auth config to get our user. So what I can say is, well, we need to actually import auth from @/app/ Firebase config. And then I can say const square bracket user is equal to use auth state, passing in my auth config. So use auth state is going to return an array in which the first value of that array should be your current user. So I'm going to just console.log my user. So if I go back to my app here and I open my console and I clear it and I refresh it, you should see I do indeed have a user here. So right here, you can see I have a user. So what we can do here is we can check, is there a user? If there is, then they can see this page. If there's not a user, push them to the sign in page. So we have our user here. I'm going to remove that console.log and then I'm going to say router is equal to use router. And then I need to import that from next navigation. I want to say if not user, I'm going to do router.push. And then let's just push them to our sign up page. So let's come back and you see we don't push them to our sign up page because we do have a user. So now let's add a log out button. So let's just kind of randomly put this in here. Let's go ahead and do a button here. I'm going to say log out. And then here I'm going to say on click. What we're going to do is I'm going to call sign out, and I'm going to import that from Firebase auth, and then we're going to pass in auth. And I'm going to make sure that I still console log the user here. And if I come back, I see my sign up page. So we still want to use console.log user, but I'm going to comment this out for a second, just so we can see the user before we get navigated. So up here, if I now click log out, I see the user is now null. So if I reinstate, if not user, push me to the sign up form, and we come back, we see we're automatically navigated to the sign up form. And without a user, if I try to go to the home page, I see the sign up form. Now, we do have an issue here to where you see here how we kind of get a flash of our sign in page until we actually have the user. That's probably not what we want here. So I think as a solution here, what we can do is I can do const user session maybe is equal to session storage dot get item, and I'll do user. And then I can say if not user or not user session, then push them to the sign up. And then when I sign out, I'm also going to want to remove this user from our session. And you could probably do this in better ways. This is kind of a quick and dirty way. We'll use session storage dot remove item, our user. And then when they sign in, I think we also want to session storage dot set item. We will do our user, and we'll just set it to true. Now, I think when we sign up, it also automatically signs the user in. So let's also do the same thing within our sign up, but I'll also verify this here in a sec. So I'll session storage dot set item, I'll do user, and I'll just set it to true because they have signed up. So let's go ahead and within our sign up page here, let's go through the entire workflow here again. So I'm going to use a different email here. So I will do, and then I'll use a password, and then I'll click sign up because the response to see user here. So I think if we head back to our home page, we see that we don't see our home page, and there's a little flaw in my logic here. This should be if not user and user session, then push them to the sign up. So let's come back here. Let's now go to our home page, and now we do see it. And I do see that my user does eventually get loaded here. So it does look like when we sign up, it does start a user session, but now I should be able to log out here. And then when I log out, it doesn't show us the home page anymore because we get rid of our user. But now I should be able to go to my sign in page, and I should be able to use and my password and sign in. And if I do, I get sent to my home page, and I see my home page because I am signed in. If I log out, I get signed out and pushed to my sign up page. So I hope that gives you the gist of working with authentication within Firebase. You know, there's some stuff we did that was a little bit quick and dirty just for the sake of this tutorial, but it should really get you started and get you learning the kind of fundamentals there. I would say you could probably use some sort of state manager for your user, like, you know, context or recoil or like Jotai or something like that, to where you can probably get around of kind of using that session storage there, which I generally would probably recommend. But this does show you kind of the quick way to do it. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and I will see you in that next one.